Out of curiosity, everybody in the room, does everybody know who Mr. Badger is? You haven't heard of him? Guys, he's keeping us honest, okay? This guy has an obligation to be an attorney to the carrier side, and he's keeping us honest as contractors. And we get to ask him, I heard one boo, save him for the end, okay? All applause and boos, save for the end. But today we get a unique panel because I've seen a lot of panels where you get to sit with other attorneys or debate attorneys and stuff like that. In this case, we get to have questions coming from the contractor side to you, and I'm very excited for this panel. And I know it was a lot of work for you to get here in the treacherous snow and drive and everything else it took you to fly and drive pretty much your whole day yesterday. So I'm so thankful that you were able to make it in. And then who here knows Mr. Steve Patrick? I think they like Steve Patrick more. I could be wrong. There's no surprise to that. Oh, you're right. Shucks, man. He did. He nailed it, right? So Steve Patrick is going to moderate the panel, and then everybody else, no, you guys have not been up. Tiffany, you've been on like every other panel, I feel like. Mr. Paul Reed out of Colorado is going to join us today. And then who knows this incredibly handsome gentleman in the end, Mr. Matthew Mulholland, who has a, I think they like him more too. Isn't that weird? And he's full of bullshit. Oh, no, wait, he thinks you're full of bullshit.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. I got it backwards this time. So please pay close attention because this is the panel. I've been very excited. We're going to start the day off right with an engaging panel, then jump straight to the women's panel. So please put your hands together for these guys. And Steve Patrick, take it away. Thank you. Oh, turn them on. Yep.
Hello. Works better that way. All right. So we've got an hour, and we're going to keep this professional and civil, and like Steve likes to say, be nice.
Be nice. That's
and
right.
So let's keep it brief and no speeches, and let's try to not go down rabbit holes. Matt, would you like to start off?
All right. Just to start things off on the right foot, Steve, what diabolical plans are you involved in currently?
I am working on a plan to ban all PAs and to ban, no, I'm kidding. Right now, really nothing serious in the Texas legislature. There's no legislation that my side is proposing for this session. There are certainly some hot topics that we believe need to be addressed in the industry, but those are mostly issues that we just need to address through dialogue and working out issues such as the appraisal process. There are tremendous issues in the appraisal process we need to address. And then otherwise, just the same garden variety stuff to try to find consensus on issues that we just keep fighting about. But no big major issues right now, I promise.
I find that hard to believe.
It is the absolute truth. Yeah. What have you heard? What's the rumor mill right now?
Huh?
Are there rumors out there?
Rumors? I mean, what has happened in Florida has definitely changed some of the landscape for sure. Seems like there's a lot going on. We have a lot of questions along those lines, so I don't want to steal this platform for all of that at the moment. But
well, let me just say real quick then as to Florida. Florida was a reaction by the insurance industry and politicians to what they perceived was going on.
Would you say it was a knee-jerk reaction?
I wouldn't say it was a knee-jerk. It was a much-needed reaction. Whether it was in some parts an overreaction, I will admit that I personally, Steve Badger, believes that, I got to be careful how I say this, that there is a place for attorney's fees to be recovered in certain claims when an insurance company does not behave properly. So I believe the complete elimination of attorney's fees perhaps was somewhat of an overreaction. I agree with that. Now, the elimination of AOBs, assignment of benefits, absolutely 100% necessary. We should get rid of AOBs across the country.
I'm not touching on that.
Paul.
Well, I would like to understand a little bit more on the AOBs. Personally, I don't believe in them. I don't use them. What is your thought of why we need to eliminate them all the way across the country?
Yeah, because I have a contract with my insured. My contract is with my homeowner. And the entire premise of that contract is that the homeowner suffers damage to their property. And I fix that damage to put them back in the same position they were before at a reasonable price. And that's the entire fundamental concept of the contract I have with my client, me being the insurance company. So when you have an AOB, it changes the dynamics. Because with an AOB then, now the person suing my client is a contractor. And that interest of the contractor is not just to be put back exactly where it was before, because that was what the homeowner wants. The contractor wants to, let's be honest, get as much as possible for that job. And that changes the dynamics of the process.
You just said that you fix the property. Did you mean to say that you indemnify them and then we fix the property?
Sure, of course. Right, my client now, we could talk about managed repair programs or invoking the right to repair, a whole nother issue. But sure, my client should pay the reasonable cost to repair the damage that occurred as a result of the storm event. 100%, and we should pay it fully and timely.
Did you want to follow up on that, Paul?
No, I'm good with it.
Okay. Tiffany?
Okay, no rabbit holes, right? You just opened it up. I feel like Alice in Wonderland now. Okay, so I have a question, but I want to clarify something you just said. To get rid of AOBs, because the homeowner has a contract with the insurance company to restore the home with like, kind, and quality back to the way it went, correct?
Agree with all that.
Okay. And those policies have a pass-through right assignment of benefit?
No. In fact, the policies state that an assignment of any benefits without the insurer consent is not allowed. But some states have held that those are not enforceable.
And some states have accepted them.
Some states have held they're not enforceable, and that therefore an assignment of benefits is proper.
Okay, so where is the checks and balance if there's not another party coming involved, such through the assignment of benefit, helping the homeowner, making sure the like, kind, and quality? So you have a contract with the insurance. Where's the checks and balance on the insurance for the homeowner to make sure it's done properly?
The checks and balances are the hundreds and hundreds of public adjusters and lawyers who are there and ready. You all have them on your Rolodex that you can call when a homeowner is not being fully and timely indemnified by the insurance company.
Gotcha. Okay. So you would rather depend on public adjusters and attorneys and not an appraisal from someone that actually knows how to install the product?
Well, so let's talk about, we're talking about appraisal process. We can talk about that separately. Whether we're talking about a contractor who's telling me what's damaged and the cost to repair that, I have no problem with that. I am absolutely fine with a contractor in the claim process explaining his or her observations as to the scope of damage and telling us what their estimate is as to the cost to repair. That's fine, and that should happen. In fact, that's the model. That's how it's always worked. But when a dispute arises and it goes beyond agreement as to the scope and price, then someone has to come in on behalf of the homeowner.
Okay, so
And the only people who are legally authorized to do that under the law are public adjusters and lawyers.
But under the contract, in some states, it's accepted.
Under the contract, in no states is it accepted. Under the
Insurance.
law, in some states, it's accepted.
And insurance waives that.
Insurance companies do not waive it. Insurance policies all state that a post-loss assignment is not allowed unless the insurance company agrees. But some states have held that that's not enforceable, and therefore AOBs are allowed.
Okay, so since we're jumping state lines, let's talk about market conditions. How are you to define the market conditions? Just take Texas alone, but and then I have a two-part question between Texas and Florida. The market conditions cannot be across the board the same in Texas. How do you define the difference?
Well, I would say the market condition is what is the reasonable price that a contractor would charge in a competitively bid project to restore the homeowner's damage.
Okay.
And if the market condition is such that because of supply chain issues, because of demand, that pricing at that time is more, then my client should pay it. I agree with that. Absolutely.
Okay. The MRPs in Florida. What do you see happening in Texas?
MRPs are coming. There is no question. Insurance companies are reacting to the issues they're dealing with, and they are realizing that we are better off, instead of having to litigate all these matters, to bringing in a contractor who is willing to perform the work at a price that we believe is reasonable. We're seeing that. I will tell you also, I'm right now for a client drafting a program for them. Every insurance policy right now has something called the right to repair in the valuation clause. In the valuation clause of the policy, the insurance company can either pay money or it can actually invoke the right to repair and actually say, okay, we agree your roof is totaled, we will repair your damage. For decades, insurance companies have been loath to invoke that because they don't want to get into the fixing business, all right? Because if the contractor screws up, then they're potentially on the hook. So they've avoided that. But because of the abuses they've dealt with so much, they've decided, you know what, we're just going to start invoking the right to repair and fixing roofs ourselves. And that, combined with managed repair programs, you're going to see more of it, guys, and it's a reaction to what's happening in the industry.
Okay, where are the market conditions going to play in the MRP and protect that good, fair price?
Well, the insurance company and the MRP contractors are going to come up with a price where there are some contractors willing to do the work for that price. Now, some of you will raise your hand and say, you're going to get the shitty-ass contractors who are going to do a crappy job, and the roofs are all going to fail. You know, it's interesting. I get calls from homeowners all the time, because if you Google my name, it comes up all over the internet. Mr. Badger, this contractor screwed up my roof, or Mr. Badger, the contractor took my money. But I've never gotten a call from someone who said, hey, Mr. Badger, this MRP contractor didn't do a good job. So I don't believe that there is an issue there. Now, I'm not a fan of all MRP programs. There are some historical large ones that I don't like personally. All right, but they're coming, and the insurance industry will continue to refine how that works to ensure for market conditions that there are contractors willing to do the work for the price that the insurance company is willing to pay. And if the insurance company is so stingy that no contractor will do it, then market conditions will adjust that, and they'll have to pay more.
Okay, so the reason you haven't had a lot of those calls is mainly because it is still coming to Texas, and a primarily part of your work is in Texas.
Sure, that's part of it. I mean, I understand that. Sure, it is not as prevalent,
Now-
MRPs in Texas, as contractors putting on roofs.
Now, my division is, 100% commercial. So this comes from a commercial perspective on an MRP. Where, what, when, and how is it controlled from a roof that is under a manufacturer warranty and an MRP, and the manufacturer says this is beyond repair?
I don't think that issue is any different whether it's an MRP program or a contractor performing the work hired by the insured. Under both situations, whether the roof is under warranty and what the manufacturer says as to whether the roof is damaged is a relevant consideration as to the necessary and appropriate scope to
So you would be in agreement with an insurance company would have to follow manufacturer recommendations and specifications?
Absolutely, 100%. I would never suggest to an insurance company that they should require a homeowner to put on a roof that does not comply with manufacturer specifications. Of course not. What about code? Code as well, of course. We should install, it's one of my lines I use all the time, we should ensure that the homeowner receives a roof installed in accordance with manufacturer and code requirements. Of course. OSHA compliance is a regulation as well. Now, we can debate for hours what additional Xactimate line items should be added to an estimate, whether you have to add harnesses or whether Xactimate says that harnesses are a tool of the trade and they're already included within the pricing. All right, we can argue about those issues, but of course, absolutely, government regulations for safety should be followed.
What would you say, I mean, to kind of get off the MRP, what would you say about different cities or counties, municipalities that don't enforce code? You know, say Texas, for example, you know, really no permits. You know, Colorado, I think I have to roof in Colorado, I believe I have like 85 licenses just to roof in Colorado, like no joke, like 85 licenses. Here in Texas, I don't roof in Texas that much. My understanding is you don't really have license and permits. And a lot of times you do, even in Colorado, you run across some municipalities that, hey, this is actually their code, but they don't enforce it. And you try to get that paid because you have to do it, but it's not paid. What would you say to that? What should we do? I think that's an issue that most people have had or are facing.
So I want my clients to pay the cost to restore a roof to what it would cost if it wasn't an insurance job. So let's take that as an initial premise, okay? What concerns me is what happens, as you guys know, is that we do have these municipalities where codes are not enforced. But then in that situation, there's all these code provisions that I'm being told that we have to pay for it. As a result of that, years ago, the insurance policies were drafted to state under code upgrade provisions that you must have enforcement of a law or ordinance. So if the building owner is told by the building official, you have to put 4 inches of ISO to achieve an R25 or whatever, then we should do that. But if in every other job in the city, all right, there is no enforcement of that and everybody's putting in 2 inches of ISO because they don't enforce the 4-inch code requirement, then I'm hard-pressed to understand why my client in that situation should pay for the 4 inches. Additionally, especially when the policy states we only owe when there is enforcement of the law or ordinance.
So obviously, they don't really define what they mean by enforcement necessarily. So for you, would you just want it to be in writing?
From the code official?
Like maybe something on their website that says that the code is enforced?
Well, I would want to make sure that it's legitimate enforcement of the code. Now, I get a lot of emails where some
What's
guy
the
reaches
difference
out to a
between
code
what-
official. Someone reaches out to the code official and says, hey, man, you know, I got this job. I need 4 inches of ISO, right? And the guy says, yeah. Right, well, but there's no enforcement. So in that situation, I'll go back and say to the code official, are you enforcing this? All right, send me something that says you're enforcing the code and they have to do it. And if they have to do it, then my client should pay for it.
I mean, if it's in writing in the code that it says that they shall do it, then they have to do it, right?
But again, the issue is enforcement of the code ordinance. That's what the policy states.
Would you mind describing what you think enforcement means?
Enforcement means, just like any code provision, the city has come out or they've issued something that says, we will not issue a permit, we're not going to allow you to do any work unless you do this.
Okay, so past precedent doesn't play a role. The city has to refuse the permit in order for the code enforcement to be applied.
I think past precedent plays a big role. That was my point.
Can-
I don't want to be the only job in the city where you got to put 4 inches of ISO when the code official doesn't give a crap in the other 90 non-insurance jobs and they don't enforce it.
Can I add to the question, past, present, and future? Because I think there's a lack of clarity of enforcement versus enforceable, and there's certain states and municipalities where I've worked in areas where the statute of limitations 10 years, and if a contractor did something wrong, absent of a permit, that homeowner could sell the home, building inspector finds, or home inspector finds a problem, calls the building official because they're mad at their contractor. Building official comes out and says they did this wrong, and the contractor's defense is going to be, well, you didn't require a permit, and the building official is going to say it's your responsibility to know that you have to do that. So my question is past, present, future when it comes to enforcement versus enforceable.
Well, your hypothetical is based upon obtaining a permit. Of course they should have gotten a permit. I agree, a permit should always be pulled if permits are required. All right, so in your hypothetical, the contractor screwed up in not getting a permit. Now, whether or not they go after him for having 2 inches of ISO instead of 4, 8 years down the road, yeah, at that point, there's probably going to need to be a paper trail that it wasn't enforced. I agree.
I don't know if I've ever had
Thank you.
building officials say that it wasn't enforced, but in the future, there's going to be a different building official. And they're going to point to the code, and they're going to say, well, the code says that you shall do this. And shall
and you're
means
going to say, well, back in
mandatory.
2023, your other guy who's no longer here said we didn't need 4 inches of ISO.
Is it
Remember,
not?
the contract says enforcement. So we could debate what enforcement means.
Right.
We can look to the case law.
I mean,
There's
this
lots
could be
of
an
case
ordinance law
law.
issue where people are paying more for this additional coverage anyway, and it's kind of weird that that additional coverage isn't going to be applied.
Oh, no, it does apply.
because there's no
It
permit.
applies consistent with the policy term, enforcement. It's like the argument that I get that we owe GC, O&P on every single claim because we collected premium based upon full replacement cost value. All right, yeah, we collect business interruption premium on every claim, but if there's not a BI loss, I don't owe it. So
Okay,
I
so
can't accept the argument that just because we
s-
collected premium, we owe it.
A city council adopts a building code for their municipality. And whether it is enforced or not, because it could be mismanaged, not enforced, but it's adopted, it's part of their law in their
Oftentimes it
city.
even says on their website, enforced.
Yes, adopted Florida building code, blah, 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 usually is what it says. So you're opening a really big can of worms by going, city council, y'all can adopt whatever the hell you want, but if you don't enforce it, then we don't have to follow it.
Yeah, so the issue is enforcement. The policy states enforcement. So we're way down this rabbit hole now. When
gotta
we have these
define it, though.
disputes in a lot of matters, I get it. It's a disputed issue as to when there's enforcement. But I think we all know the situation that concerns us. All right,
No.
it's the finding some obscure item to try to drive up the cost when in no situation
not
outside of
obscure.
insurance is it ever enforced.
Codes are not obscure. They're very clearly written out. I mean, there's even books where they have commentary on what it is that they meant by it. You could definitely find out exactly what is meant.
I will be glad to share with you the next 10 enforcement disputes that come across my desk, and you can tell me how clear those are. Yeah.
That would be interesting, actually. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
We have to move on.
That's a great issue. I recognize it's a legitimate issue.
Another question, Matthew.
Okay. When do you think the wear and tear exclusion should be applied? Is it something that should always be a primary or proximate cause? And if it is, where is the threshold between the thing just failed of its own age and condition?
Yeah, so every policy has a wear and tear exclusion. All right, so let's put that out there. Every roof, after a short period of time, has wear and tear. All right,
Like immediately, right?
I'm sorry?
Almost immediately.
Almost immediately. So my clients do not, let me step back. The purpose of that exclusion is to ensure that we don't get claims for old, tired roofs that say, people say, I got an 18-year-old roof here, it's very old and tired, nothing bad has happened to it from a storm, but it's really old and tired, it's coming apart, so buy me a new roof. I think we all can agree that my client doesn't owe that. All right, so that is the traditional application of the wear and tear exclusion. Now, the issue has become, because of something we have in Texas called the concurrent causation doctrine, when you have a roof that has to be replaced for a combination of reasons, because of, let's say, hail damage and because the roof is old and tired, all right, does the insurance company owe in that situation? If you have hail damage to an old and tired roof, and that hail damage is the only cause, all right, just because it's old and tired did not contribute to the need to replace it, i.e. the hail would have damaged a newer roof, we should pay that. All right, but the best example I have is an old case from the All Saints Catholic Church in Dallas. And the situation was you had a few hardy slate tiles on a roof that were damaged by hail. So you had 20 tiles on this church damaged by hail. As we all know, over time, the hardy slate tiles become brittle and fall apart when you walk on them. So when they went out there to try to replace the 20 tiles, the contractor said, oh crap, all the tiles around here as we walk on it and try to maneuver are all disintegrating and coming apart. So they said, you insurance company have to buy us an entire roof. The court said, no. In that situation, all the insurance company owes are the tiles that were damaged by the covered peril, all right, the hail. They don't owe for the old defective tiles that should have been fine. So in that situation, that's a situation where you have some wear and tear. We don't owe for those because we only owe for the damaged tiles.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the Allstate's attorney for the plaintiff side probably didn't want to get into definition of direct loss, things along those lines.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Are you saying the lawyer for the insurance company was
Not for the
lying?
insurance company, unless that was you.
It was not. I was not involved in the case.
All right.
As you're saying, the insured hired
the
an incompetent
plaintiff.
lawyer and should have argued better.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So there, direct physical loss is a thing that has been very clearly defined in many jurisdictions, probably quite a bit in the state of Texas.
All right, and what is your understanding of what that definition is?
It would be everything that has happened in the same chain of events that starts off from the same cause of loss. So if the same chain of events leads to the replacement of additional damages that occurred during a repair, that would be part of the direct physical loss.
Yeah, and that's not the definition under a state that has a concurrent causation doctrine analysis. Other states have what's called an efficient proximate cause analysis. What is the main cause of the damage? And under an efficient proximate cause analysis, I could understand your argument that the efficient proximate cause of the total roof replacement is the hail. But under a concurrent causation analysis, and Texas is very firmly a concurrent causation
That's
state.
only if we can separate the losses, though, even in Texas, with the concurrent causation doctrine. If we can separate the losses completely to where the first loss of, was it hail on that one?
It was hail.
It was. So if we can't separate hail from the wear and tear, then it would still end up
Yeah,
being.
and in that situation, if you have, again, I've said, if you have an old tired roof, all right, and then it comes and the hail hits the old tired roof and the roof has to be replaced, we buy those. All right? I do not argue against buying those roofs. Now, there's a really growing issue right now about when you have wear and tear and covered cause of loss. That it is an issue right now. There's a couple of recent cases on this. I suspect eventually we're going to get clarity in Texas on the issue from the Texas Supreme Court. But now, cases like All Saints are really the cases that control. And really the big issue also where this arises is old damage. All right, somebody comes in and says, we got hail damage. And the insurance company says, yeah, you do, but it's obvious it happened 15 years ago. All right, and they say, well, we got a little bit of damage now, and then, yeah, we had a storm a while ago. That is the situation where this doctrine really gets applied a lot, because I ain't paying for old damage that existed prior to my policy.
I'll agree with you there. As a follow-up question, do you think that insurers should be required or obligated to name all the causes of loss that are acting concurrently or in sequence to the event?
My client's duty, I'll give you a lawyer answer first, is to conduct a reasonable investigation of the claim and determine the scope of damage and appropriate measure. The insured's burden is to establish a covered cause of loss during the policy period. So I can legally give you an answer that the burden to identify the perils contributing is on the insured. That is the legal answer. Now, am I aware of situations all the time where my clients go out there and see some hail damage and they see some wind damage, even though it's just a hail claim, they cover some wind damage? Of course, I see that. And if my client sees something obvious out there that's damaged, that's not from that peril, they ought to bring it to the insured's attention. I do agree with that.
How dumbed down?
How what?
How dumbed down
Okay.
can someone be and still investigate a claim for an insurance company? These latter now guys, they're not licensed adjusters, and they don't know what they're doing.
All right, so let's pause there. Your assumption in your statement is that latter now guys are adjusting claims for insurance companies. Okay?
No, I said investigate the loss.
Or investigating
That's
the law.
what I said.
All right. I will tell you that I agree, all right, that latter now guys should not be adjusting insurance claims.
Should they be investigating the loss?
I don't have any problem with a latter now guy out there sending in photographs of the loss to a desk adjuster somewhere. I don't have a problem with that. All right, now, I do have a problem with them making claim decisions or claim recommendations because they're not licensed adjusters.
Or engineers making claim suggestions.
Well, engineers on both sides always provide their professional opinion as to their observations. So I don't have a problem with that. My clients hire engineers not to make claim determinations, but to identify damage and offer opinions as to the existence of damage and necessary scope of repair. I agree that the coverage determinations should be left to the insurance company's licensed adjusters and professionals.
Since you brought up engineers, I'm going to jump on that, sir.
Okay.
And tie it back into a previous question. When an engineer is asked to go out to identify causation, often we see one cause of loss. Maybe it's the primary, but it always seems to be wear and tear or improper installation, neglect, something along those lines. But
Okay,
they
so
never name
let's pause there, Matthew, because I could make the same broad generalized statement. Every report I get from a policyholder advocate always finds hail damage. So we don't do each other any service by making these broad generalizations.
Agreed.
When I make a broad statement about public adjusters doing bad things, everybody rains unholy hell on me for saying Badger thinks all PAs are bad. Of course I don't think all PAs are bad. All right, and I say repeatedly, there is a role for a public adjuster in the claim process, and as I said earlier, there is a role for a contractor in the claim process. So let's not make generalizations that all insurance company engineers just find exclusions and don't find coverage or don't find damage. Because I could make the same generalization on the other side, and I don't think it's fair to the professionals that we hire on either side.
All right, to bring the question back up, though, if the engineers that are hired are only naming what they perceive as the primary or proximate cause, and they ignore the hail that comes after the wear and tear, because they believe that because the wear and tear was there, it made it more susceptible to hail, but then they only name the wear and tear.
I don't see engineer. I'd like you to send me engineer reports that do that.
I'll just send you the
They
whole
ignore,
file.
they see obvious hail damage, but they ignore it and only talk about the wear and tear. I'd be surprised if engineers were doing that. And if one of the engineers that I worked with was doing that, I would tell him to stop it.
Be prepared to be surprised.
Okay, well, look, I know what you're going to send me. You're going to send me something where the engineer took photos and said there's just wear and tear, and you're saying, come on, Badger, that's obviously hail damage. Okay, that's what you're going to send me. I would hope in that situation that in his report, the engineer said, these blemishes here are not hail damage, they're mechanical damage, they're wear and tear or something, and provide an explanation as to why, in their professional opinion, it's not hail damage but something else. Just like I hold the policyholder advocate engineers to the standard of telling me why they believe it's hail damage and not something else. Of course, we should both do that.
Can you define damage for me real quick?
Can I define damage?
Yes, please.
Our policies provide coverage for physical loss or damage. So damage can be defined in the roofing context. I'll use the definition that the Texas Department of Insurance used in some bulletins around 20 years ago, either a reduction in life expectancy or inability to shed water.
All right, so that's the functional damage definition. But for most
that's the definition of damage promulgated by the Texas Department of Insurance in some policy forms about 20 years ago. If we want to go into functional damage, I'm happy to talk about that. And let me say this. The policies do not use the words functional damage. I am not a fan of the words functional damage. In every conference I give, every time I speak to insurance people, I say, quit using the words functional damage. All right, you're just creating an issue for yourself because our policies don't use those words. Let's use the words physical loss or damage that appear in our policy. And in my view, the definition is reduction in life expectancy or inability to shed water.
The courts don't seem to agree with you on that.
Courts agree with me 100%.
100%?
Yes. Show me a different definition of damage.
Manufacturer specifications, they have functional definitions.
Yeah, generally the courts have said that if it's direct physical loss or damage, specifically when they say both, then you're going to have the ability to have any kind of a physical alteration to the tangible property that is a detriment to the property.
So I'm aware of the dents to metal roof cases where the courts have said dents equal damage. I'm aware of those, that's right. And so that we can get to the question of whether insurance companies should pay for dents. Minor dents that nobody can see unless the sun's at a certain angle. But what's happened now? Because everybody started trying to collect on dented roof claims and get those ACV payments and never fix the roofs, right, and just pocket the money and go to Disney World.
Yeah, you warned us about generalizations.
Well, I understand, but okay, you're right.
And the contractor didn't book the
But I'm saying
trip.
we had a lot of these claims come in, all right, and this is what happened then. And what did the insurance companies do? They drafted a cosmetic damage endorsement that says we don't pay for dents. Unless They actually affect the performance of
And
the
if
roof.
that
The
does
function.
exist in the policy, then it's very appropriate to apply that cosmetic damage exclusion. The fact that they're saying cosmetic damage in a lot of these, or insignificant damage, or something along those lines, gives you an idea that they would normally pay for that if it wasn't in there as an exclusion.
The case law does not state that if you don't have an exclusion, therefore it's covered. We just addressed this issue in all the COVID litigation. If an insured did not have a virus exclusion, that didn't mean that the carrier owed for COVID losses. All right, so just because there isn't an exclusion, you cannot assume that it was covered.
Well, that was, I mean, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison.
It's
You're not
absolutely the
talking
same,
about-
because you're talking about a legal principle of does the absence of an exclusion
Well, if there
mandate
is
coverage?
physical loss that exists, though,
I
so
will
that
go
was
back-
the issue with the virus portion. Was there any kind of a physical damage? or
That's the
loss?
underlying issue, which is really no different than the issue that you're raising. What is physical loss or damage to a roof? Same issue we had in COVID.
Would you say that a reduction in fire rating is, we're going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah. Paul, your next question.
I got really thrown off there. I was down the rabbit hole with you.
I was looking forward to the reduction in fire rating question, but we'll move on.
So I have a question. So I think, for those of us and most of the room that have been in this industry for a long time, we've seen it, just going in a direction that we don't like. I personally don't think it's sustainable the way that we've run. I think sometimes that's an unpopular opinion to a lot of contractors. I think that most assume it's just going to carry on the way it's always been, and I see it a little bit different. But my belief is, we're so far apart that somehow we've got to get back to like kind of a middle ground. Is that possible?
Absolutely.
How do you do that?
Well, of course it is. It's possible through dialogue. That's why I come and do all of these things. That's why I invite people to talk at my sessions. And so dialogue is good, so we understand each other's positions, and we can try to find some consensus on issues. What you've done with your art group. People despise managed repair, but I think you've created a program with art, which is a preferred contractor program, that is fair to all three sides. Right? The contractor, the insured, and the insurance company. So through dialogue, I think we can achieve consensus on a lot of issues. I've not hidden my view that I think we should have a standard residential roof spec. All right, let's all sit down in a room and agree that we'll pay for drip edge, we'll pay for underlayment, these are the items you put in there, but don't be putting harnesses, don't be putting tape, don't be putting these things that you're not going to do. Let's figure out the items that it's really going to take to replace a roof and agree upon a standard residential roof spec. Yes, we should put our energy into doing that, because who wins? Our mutual client. And really, that's what I want. So long as my client has to do it at a fair price. Right.
All right, Steve, let's talk about ass.
Talk about what?
Ass.
All right.
I think you can be an ass man.
I heard you like ass.
So ass is ash, smoke, and soot.
Okay.
Shall I remind you, you invited me to ask?
I am happy to talk about a good ass issue anytime.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Good. Your opinions on ass?
Oh, goodness. Yes. So, obviously, this is a growing hot topic. My clients should pay for physical loss or damage to a structure that is not directly affected by fire, but is affected by smoke and soot. I agree with that general proposition. All right, and I've talked to Chip Merlin several times about this issue, talked to some PAs. All right, so I want to make sure that, yes, if your house is messed up because you got soot and ash or smoke through it and it smells bad and you got ash, all right, if the policy covers that, then we should pay for the reasonable cost to fix it. I don't dispute that. Here's my concern. All right, my concern is that with this new technology that people are using and these tests that are out there, we all know what I'm talking about, all right, people are pushing too far. Don't get greedy, because I know what's going to happen. It's like any other issue. All right, once people start pushing so much on these claims and the cloud zone is so broad, and it keeps getting bigger, and little wipes that are wiping up dust just because they're dark, and it looks like maybe it's soot, and those claims are being submitted, we all know what's going to happen. The insurance companies will react, and you're going to see a soot exclusion. All right, it's just like I talked about with metal roofs and other things. The insurance companies will react to the abuses, and you will see a reaction that's going to take that coverage away. So let's make sure that we are only pursuing matters where there is real damage to the interior that affects the living environment, and not we're pursuing damages where it's a little bit on the outside of the house, on the siding, and it's going to just come off next time it rains. All right, let's be careful.
Have you already been involved in some preliminary conversations with your clients on what those limitations are and where the thresholds live?
I've had discussions with clients. I've also had discussions with policyholder advocates who are concerned about the trend here, about what is the proper scope of where there should be coverage. I'm not presently, you asked me if I have any draconian shit up my sleeve right now. I'm not drafting an exclusion right now for soot and smoke.
That's next week.
That's, I got a different exclusion I'm drafting right now.
All right. So you don't
And
want
I
to...
don't. I said I don't have any bad. I'm drafting appraisal endorsements. That's what I'm drafting right now. We can talk about that if we want to talk about appraisal.
Do you want to talk about
Although,
Steve? Do you want to talk about that?
So we're finding appraisals to take twice as long as they used to. Appraisers on the carrier side are digging in their heels. It's costing twice as much because the hours it takes to put into it. Appraisers obviously can't work on a percentage. They have to work on an hourly basis or a flat rate. They can't afford to work on a flat rate because it's taking twice as long. And we actually have appraisers who are forthcoming and say, I can't agree with you, or they'll stop giving me appraisals.
all right, so let me tell you what I hear. These policyholder appraisers are getting so much work, I can't even get them to return my calls. They are grossly inflating the numbers so high because they just want to get the umpire to meet at a stupid number in the middle. All right? And what they're doing is they're charging by the hour, but they're waiting until the award comes out to send their bill, and then the bill is miraculously 10% of the increase in claim value. All right? So I hear the other side of the abuses coming from your side. Now, who's right? As my ex-wife used to say, there's three sides to every story. Mine, hers, and the truth. All right? And the truth is somewhere in the middle there. All right? There are abuses on both sides. I get it. There are appraisers on my side, a couple in particular that I won't hire. All right? Because they're too radical in favor of insurance companies. But there's appraisers on the other side who you ought not be hiring because they're too radical on the other side. All right? But if we're going to save the appraisal process, we got to dump the bullshit on both sides and get back to what it was intended to be, a non-judicial dispute resolution process where three smart people got in a room and figured it out so Mrs. Smith could quickly get her damage repaired. But you and I both know, Steve, that there are lawyers out there signing everybody up at referrals from contractors, dumping them in appraisal, and taking a 30 to 45% contingency fee. And that's fucked up. That should not happen because who loses?
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that is just wrong. Mrs. Smith loses because she can never replace her roof. Okay, so let's move appraisal back to a process where we can resolve disputes quickly. And I'm working on, and I think I've shared with you, my 3-page form that I've put together that does nothing to affect the policyholder's rights, but does everything to eliminate the abuses. We have to fix appraisal because I like appraisal. Appraisal's good. I don't like lawsuits against my clients. But appraisal has become an intermediary step now until the lawsuit then comes. And that's a problem. I'm sorry for cursing. A hot topic of mine right now. Yes.
Oh, you're in a room with roofers. So.
Yeah, that's why I figure for effect it's okay. Yeah, I'm not going to do it on Wednesday or Thursday when I talk to a bunch of reinsurance people. No.
Well, let's get together. I'd like to hammer that out with you.
We should. The next question is, what about legislating appraisal? I don't think we should legislate appraisal. Appraisal is a creature of contract. If the insurance companies don't like what's happening under the appraisal clause in their policies, they ought to fix it. They ought to change it. Yeah. Now, here's what's happening. There's companies taking the appraisal clause out of their policy altogether. And that's not good. That's unfortunate that that's happening.
How do you feel about mandatory arbitration?
Mandatory arbitration. So I got to be careful again because I have clients who have it. In a commercial context with sophisticated insureds who can make an informed decision whether they want to accept mandatory arbitration, they're aware that it's in their policy. They have brokers who are helping them or agents that are helping them. And it says, you're buying a policy here that has mandatory arbitration in New York. In that situation, I'm okay with it. I am not a fan of it in the residential context. Yeah. We should not force Mrs. Smith to go to arbitration. I'd rather it not be in a residential policy.
Because the insureds are patently unsophisticated.
The insureds, I'd rather have an insured be able to go to appraisal and get their claim resolved that way, because it's easy and should be quick and inexpensive. Or I'd rather them be able to hire a local lawyer and go down to the local courthouse in front of 12 of their peers and say why the bad insurance company screwed up. I'm okay with that. I respect our judicial process. Yeah. So for a homeowner, I'd rather not see it. But for a sophisticated commercial insured, if they choose to accept a policy that has that provision, I'm in favor of it.
Go ahead, Kitty. You got a question? You've been long.
Well, I want to go back to a term that you've used, and it's a reasonable investigation. And so it goes back to my market conditions in different market areas. What responsibility should be upon your client to provide people of the knowledge of where they are investigating?
Oh, my client should reasonably communicate as to the status of a claim. They should not go dark for 6 months and not say anything, of course.
Yeah,
And here I go. Let me go back again. First thing I said, insurance companies should fully and timely reasonably investigate claims. We should do that. And there are deadlines under the law as to when we should have that done.
The knowledge of those that are doing the investigations in different market conditions, because that's something that I see, is that they're not providing experienced, seasoned people to go into these different markets on a storm response. So the investigations are not reasonable because they're not trained, seasoned, educated.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot.
Let me add to that, Steve, really quick, because Florida, for example, so we do, mainly commercial, and over the years, generally when you're dealing with a commercial large loss guy, they were knowledgeable, they were good, they came out, they knew what they were looking at, and I've seen, especially in Florida this last year, I would say 75% of the guys I've seen and met, they have no idea if it's a TPO roof or it's EPDM or if it's mod bit. Literally, that's where we're starting at. How can we fix that? Because what that causes is just complete chaos. Reserve is $100, on a $1 million job, and it's just complete chaos. And so you can literally, that this just went a year. You're not getting this done next month because of the way we started. Like, how can we solve that issue?
So let me just defend the insurance company's problem in that situation first, because I am mindful of the concern. Absolutely. I want experienced adjusters out there, especially in complex commercial losses. All right, I get that. But understand the insurance company's problem. They got a big hurricane that hits, and all of a sudden they got 10,000 losses. All right, where do you get people to adjust 10,000 losses? You can't have them sitting around all year, twiddling their toes and paying them, waiting for the next big storm to hit. All right, so it doesn't work. You have an amazing amount of claims come in that have to be adjusted, and we don't have enough adjusters to do them. All right, now if you want us to hire adjusters and have them sit around for 18 months till the next storm comes, we can do that, but you're all going to pay more money in premium so we could pay those people. So that's the problem my industry has, because it's a catastrophe model. Now, with that said, we still have to make sure that adequate, reasonable investigations are conducted. And I'll be finished, and the insurance companies do acknowledge. We recognize, because I see posts and ads, and in fact, one of the classes at this thing I'm going to this week talks about the talent drain in the insurance industry. We recognize it, and I think the insurance companies are working on how to get back to the good seasoned GA, have them out there. But again, just understand the problem we have in the mass catastrophe situation.
So I can parallel with it. We've responded to, we have a retail roofing business that is an everyday business, 21 years old, but we also respond to have a storm response, and we respond, with 700 people to it. So I do parallel with it. However, I just think contractually, with a reasonable investigation, their responsibility should be to offer training between the storms, to do something to get these guys more educated and more seasoned so that we can expedite some claims and stop the loss.
I don't disagree with that at all. Right. I mean, look, we want to send experienced people out there quickly who know what they're doing and measure the claims. But unfortunately, in a catastrophe situation, that's not always a perfect model. I admit that.
I got a question from the audience for you. What's wrong with your face? I didn't want to ask that one.
I was in a car accident in 1983.
No, I think
a cement wall head on. That's why half of my forehead is paralyzed. So thanks a lot for bringing that up.
I think they were talking about the red face a while ago.
Oh, my red face. I was in Mexico all week golfing. So
it got really red when we talked about ass.
Oh, well, that's this is being recorded. I'm sure people will see it, so I had to be careful what I said.
I think we're live.
No, but I see a lady here with a camera. I see a guy there with an iPod or a tripod. Yeah.
What's one thing that a contractor can do that would make it much harder for someone like you?
Let me answer it a little bit differently. Okay. What's one thing a contractor can do that would make it much harder for the adjuster to delay the claim or not pay?
Yeah, that's a better question.
Yeah. The one thing, and you've heard me say this, Steve has heard me say this, is get rid of insurance proceeds contracts. Do not give the insurance company an insurance proceeds contract. Give the insurance company your price. Yeah. Here is what it should cost. Here's what I'm going to charge to replace this roof. Do not play the insurance proceeds game thinking that I'm going to continue to juice the guy up as high as possible because I haven't put a price down. I'm going to, and I'll use a strong word, extort as much as I can out of him through adjustment, through supplementing, through appraisal to get it as high as possible so I can win the storm on this one claim. Don't do that, okay? Give the insurance company a price. Break it down. Here are my materials, here's my labor, here's my profit. Right? And if that number is within the ballpark of what the adjuster comes up with using his Xactimate measure, you're going to get claims resolved. Right? Most of these adjusters are working on flat rates. All right? They want a reason to be done and move on to the next one. All right? Here's what you say. Hey, Mr. Adjuster, all right, this is my number. It's a good number. I've inspected this roof. Don't worry, I'm not going to get you a supplement in 2 months from now from some 303 area code who's going to lie and say they're you and they're not. Okay? Don't do that. Say, this is what this roof is going to cost. Don't worry, I'm not going to supplement it or dump it in appraisal. Let's get this done for your policyholder. And you will resolve more claims quickly that way. So that's the one thing I tell every contracting group I speak to. Don't do insurance proceeds contracts. Give a price.
To that point, I've done that, and we've been successful doing that on a lot of things. The second thing that I know is a pain point to a lot of the industry, the adjuster a lot of times then will ask for your invoices. And the consensus generally on Facebook, 'cause that's kind of the Bible of roofing, is never give them your invoice. What would you say to that?
All right, so I got to give you a little lesson here. Again, an abuse leads to a reaction. And there was a case called Whitestone. And the insurance company measured the loss at $1.6 million. They paid $1.2 million ACV and said, come back and we'll give you the other $400 when the roof's done. When the roof was done, the insured through his PA came back and said, hey, we're done. It costs a lot of money, $2.4 million. Insurance company said, wait a minute, we measured it at 1.6. It's not a $2.4 million roof. And they said, yes, it is. And they sued the insurance company. All right, pretty standard scenario. So in litigation in front of a federal judge, the insurance company sought discovery of the contractor's subcontractor invoices. All right, let's figure out what it really costs to put on this roof. And you know what they found? They found the roof was actually put on by a subcontractor, turnkey, for $800,000. $800,000, a third of what the general contractor had submitted as the cost. And the federal judge who had that case was pissed off. He wrote a decision now that I rely upon, all right, that I have the right to rely upon it because it's the law, that the best evidence of the cost to replace the roof is what was charged by the subcontractor who did the roof. So if you are what we call on my side a paper contractor, you go out there and you write an estimate and you get the estimate as high as possible and then sub it out as cheaply as possible and live off the delta, I'm going to ask you for your subcontractor invoices every time, and you're going to have to give them to me.
So let's say a general contractor hires a roofing sub, and they charge them $100,000. So
Okay.
what's a fair margin for that GC?
So the GC in this world, right, if it's a job where the involvement of a general contractor is reasonably necessary, then my clients will pay 10 plus 10 general contractor overhead and profit. That's just the standard. That's the market condition in this market that is paid in the insurance market. So if the involvement of a general contractor is reasonably necessary, and if the cost is incurred, my client should pay 20%. If it's not reasonably necessary, my client should pay 0.
And then the GC makes nothing.
The GC was not necessary, and under my policy, the involvement of a general contractor in that claim was not reasonably necessary, so I don't owe it.
Who determines whether or not a GC is reasonably necessary?
You know, there's no three trade rule. This is one of these common law issues. What is it? And the case law from prior disputes have generally come down and said that we owe GC-O&P when the involvement of a general contractor is reasonably necessary. So for purposes of ACV, I tell insurance companies, is it the type of job where you need someone to coordinate the job? And if it is, we should pay it. If not, if it's just a basic one-trade roof job, right, then it's not reasonably necessary. I'm sorry? Well, I mean, if it's the type of thing that a roofing contractor can do without engaging other trades. And we all know what that is. You're gonna deal with the gutters, you're gonna deal with a little bit of fascia painting, things of that nature. Right? Now, if you have some extra overhead, or extra time in organizing those additional trades, then put some additional general supervision into your estimate and tell the carrier, hey, I got a guy who had to do these things. He spent about 10 hours on it. All right, I put that in here. I'm not going to try to hit you with GC-O&P, but can you please pay the 10 hours for general supervision? Good luck with that, huh? Yeah.
Do you want the question in the audience? All right, I got one last question, I think.
No, you don't. You have like 20, but you only have
I
time
have
for
a
one
shit
more.
ton. Yeah, there's a lot. All right, so you publicly stated many times, I think we've heard you even say that on a stage recently, that you just want what's best for the policyholders. But we don't ever really get to see you calling out bad actions from the carrier side. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I represent the carrier side. So you don't know what I say behind the scenes when a carrier calls me up and they show me a claim file and I look at it and I agree they should have bought the roof. Right? And that happens. Right? What, if you're familiar with my firm, what happens with the vast majority of the cases that come through my office? Thousands. They get resolved. We talk to the other side, we look at the engineering reports, we talk to the contractors, and we reach a fair resolution. Right? So all that people see publicly is the public Steve Badger that's going after the guys who are trying to commit fraud against my clients. All right? You see that, and I post about it, and people talk about, and Chip Merlin blogs about, here's what Badger did this time. All right? So yeah, if someone's trying to rip off my insurance company, I'm going to go after them. But I can assure you, there are lots and lots of matters where I write letters to insurance companies and say, you should have paid this. And they do.
So your public opinion can be bought?
So we in the room, in our industry, want to see the fraudsters go to prison more than you do.
Yes.
Do you understand why?
Because, well, I have an opinion why. Yeah.
Yeah, because they give our industry a black eye.
Yeah. They make it harder for all you to do it the right way. Because as I keep saying, every bad thing that happens, the insurance industry reacts.
So do you think that executives that work for the insurance company that commit fraud should go to prison?
Anyone who commits fraud should go to prison. The definition is, what is fraud?
Well, The Texas Department of Insurance defines it. It says anyone who lies or misleads for financial gain.
Yeah, well, that's not the
Involved
Texas
in a-
Department of Insurance. That is a penal statute under the Texas Insurance Code. All right, so if anyone who commits fraud is a violation of the fraud provision in the penal code, they should be investigated and, if appropriate, charged. I would never disagree with that. Yeah. Now the next question would be, well, Badger, do you ever see insurance companies, commit fraud? Of course. Right? Yeah. And I have said publicly that in my cases, all right, in the thousands of cases that have crossed my desk, I've never seen an insurance company in one of my matters say, this claim is covered, but screw them, don't pay it. Okay, I've never seen that. I've seen a lot of disputes. I've seen insurance companies who have maybe taken overly aggressive positions, right? But I've not seen fraud. And if you have it on behalf of an insurance company, then they should be prosecuted.
You've never seen anyone from the insurance industry mislead?
Not intentionally, no. Not in my claims that I've handled. All right? Now, not in the claims that I've handled. Honest to God, that's true. Now, have I seen positions that I've told them are incorrect? Okay? Yeah, lots of times. Now, ask me the question about the guys down in Florida and what's going on down there with estimates. Right, okay, in that situation, if a client called me up and said, hey, Badger, we got all these IA estimates, they didn't properly apply our policy provisions, is it okay if we just change them ourselves and not tell the IA? I would say, no, that's not a good idea. Okay, don't do that. All right, take the IA estimate, put it on your own letterhead, and apply coverage, and then submit that estimate.
One final question. Do consumers bind themselves to carriers' internal policies and procedures when they purchase a policy?
No, they're not bound to it. No.
Well, then why do
But
carriers...
the carrier is going to apply their policies and procedures, right? And if the consumer believes those are unreasonable, right, then they can seek a remedy.
And how would they do that?
They hire a PA, they hire a lawyer, they file a complaint with the Texas Department of Insurance. They do all of those different things that are out there available for consumers to attack insurance company conduct.
Why would one party try to put on another party extra contractual obligations that the second party never agreed to?
Well, that's an interesting general concept, but I would not agree that's what's happening. No. No. Hold on.
Wow.
I'll say it on the other side. If they hire a PA, if the insured hires a PA,
yes,
and the PA policy is to always include general contractor overhead and profit, why should I have to pay and deal with the fact that the PA always adds general contractor overhead and profit to every policy or every claim? That's their policy.
Are you aware of a PA that has an internal policy and procedure that says that?
Yes, hundreds of them. Every estimate I get has GCO&P regardless of whether it's reasonably necessary. Yes. I got PAs and contractors who say every roof they see is damaged, and you know who they are.
Does the consumer have a right, we're down to 8 seconds, does the consumer have a right to see the internal policies and procedures that are being enforced upon them?
That is a legal question that's been addressed in the courts, and the courts have said in some situations, yes, sure.
Yeah, like a prime
Yeah.
contract.
But if you ask me for it during the claim process, I'm going to say no. Yeah.
Everybody, thanks Steve for coming up here and being badgered by us.
Right. Enjoyed it.